Welcome if you've just joined us. Welcome to our CitySwitch Rubbish Rehab webinar. We'll get kicked off in a minute or so. Okay, welcome everyone. It's 12:30, so still some people to join, but I can see that the numbers are rising quickly. So I'm going to get started with our intro. So thanks so much for joining us this afternoon for our CitySwitch Rubbish Rehab webinar. I'm Emily. I'm the CitySwitch National Coordinator and City of Sydney Program Manager. Today's a 90-minute session to support you to improve your office waste management. And we are expecting about 100 people to come along today from across the country. There's roughly a third from Adelaide, about a third from Melbourne, and then the last third from Sydney. So it'll certainly be quite diverse, and we'll do our best to cover off solutions in each jurisdiction. We would love to know who's joined us, so please drop your name in the chat, your business, and your location today. That would be really great for everyone to see who's come along. We've got about 37 who've joined us so far. Please note that today's session will be recorded and available on our CitySwitch YouTube channel. Hi, Chris. Thanks for coming along. Hi, Rachel. Hi, Jane. Great. So if you've just joined us, thanks for coming along. We would love to know who is here with us today. So please drop your name, business and city in the chat. We're expecting about 100 to come along today from all across the country. Hi, Lloyd. Hi, Alex. Hi, Jimmy. Thanks for joining. Okay, Freyja, do you mind flicking to the next slide, please? So today I'm on Gadigal country and I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the original custodians of the local area I'm on today. And I'd like to acknowledge their continued connection to country, pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders past and present, and to the custodians of the country you're on today too. Welcome, Roz. Welcome, Sophie. Hi, Daniela, our CitySwitch Program Manager in North Sydney. Thanks for coming. And Freyja, can you flick on to the next slide for me, please? So today we're talking about reducing your waste, which falls under reduce your office emissions on the net zero pathway. Waste came in at number 1. It was the priority topic for business members to focus on this year. So I really hope that you find this session both inspiring and practical to take the necessary actions in your business. I'm going to hand over now to Freyja from Social Enterprise Green Connect. Freyja is an expert in sustainable waste management. She's a NABERS accredited waste assessor. She's led hundreds of waste audits in commercial office and delivered waste education at large scale events. So over to you, Freyja.
Hi everyone, thank you Emily. Thank you everyone for coming along today. I wanted to just start off by running through the agenda so you have an idea of how this webinar will be laid out. So we're going to get through this introduction and I'm going to give an overview on circular economy principles and how you can incorporate these into your office waste management. We're then going to go through understanding your office waste, and Emily will jump back in to give an overview on the CitySwitch visual waste assessment tool, and I'll provide some alternatives that you can use to understand your office waste as well. We're then going to have Duncan Le Good from SoilCo come in and speak to his experience in organics waste and how that relates to office waste management. We're going to go over setting targets and the importance of developing your waste plan. Then run through some practical strategies for office waste management, including some of the most common items that we see come up again and again in offices. We are going to have a Q&A, so please, as we are talking, put all of your questions into the Q&A function, and we'll have some designated time to go through those throughout the webinar. There are no stupid questions, so if you want to know anything, please put it in there and we will try to cover it and answer it as best we can. I then run through a supplier showcase. It's by no means exhaustive, but just to give you an idea of some of the organisations that can help you improve your office waste management. And then we are going to have Roger Stamford from EML come in and speak to best practice engagement in waste management. If we have some more time, we will run through a little bit more of a Q&A at the end, and then we will finally wrap up. All right, so to start us off, I'm just going to run through some of the circular economy principles. I think it's really good and important to have that theoretical understanding backing up why you might take a certain action in waste management. I'm sure that some of you are already familiar with these, but the first principle of circular economy is designing out waste and pollution. So around 80% of a product's environmental impact is decided upon in the design stages. Considering product design is thus really important. We need to create items that are durable, that are repairable, and that are recyclable. And that is really key in avoiding waste and conserving resources. Principle number 2 is keep products and materials in use. So we think of waste as garbage to throw away. We really need to change that mindset and start looking at waste as actually a collection of very valuable resources that are typically finite. We don't have an unlimited supply of them, and we are just sending them to sit in landfills. They go into our oceans, they go to incinerators, and we then can't access those resources to reuse them, repurpose them, or recycle them in any way. And this is detrimental as we need to then mine more of these, or some of these resources also contribute to emissions. They release methane into the atmosphere, which is quite damaging. And then principle 3 is regenerating natural systems. And this is obviously incredibly important. Understanding how products are made really connects us to the world that they come from. Sometimes it can feel quite distant when you're sitting in your office using your laptop to imagine that it came from the earth, but it did. And we need to understand that. And wherever possible, your organization should aim to track both the positive and the negative impacts on the environment so that you can manage those to the best of your ability. So this may be a little theoretical. I will dive into some practical tips to actually implement these principles in your office. So for principle 1, designing out waste and pollution, one of the best things that you can do in your office is reducing single-use items, and this is going to apply very specifically to takeaway. Takeaway food containers are a massive waste item in offices. So some options that you can do to reduce these are by providing reusable options in your office for staff to use, educating and encouraging your staff to bring their own reusable containers rather than getting takeaway options. You can also collaborate with food and cafe providers in or around your building to provide discounts or other incentives for staff who do bring reusable containers and are continually doing the right thing. Sustainable procurement is also really important. So choosing sustainable companies for procuring any necessary office items. And this includes things like stationery and paper, but also things like furniture and electronics. So you should be looking for items that have little to no packaging, locally made items, items created from sustainable or repurposed materials, and also considering where that product will go at the end of its life when you are finished using it. And then, of course, digitalization. So utilizing technology and digital documents rather than printing, which does consume quite a lot of resources. And then principle 2, keeping products and materials in use. Repair and maintenance is a really big one, ensuring that if an item does get broken or damaged in some way, the first step is not to send it to landfill. It is to figure out if you can repair or maintain this. And this does particularly apply to items like furniture and electronics. And bonus points if you can find somebody locally who will do this for you as you're supporting local economies. And then upcycling, this one is a little bit more specific and it will depend on the items in your office, but upcycling wherever possible rather than throwing away, and just considering how the products you already own could be reused in a different purpose. And then donation. So if you do have items in usable condition that your office no longer has use for, you can consider donating them either to local charities, organisations, or to people in need. And it's just a great way of ensuring that the products will remain in use and also helping somebody out, which is really lovely. And then principle 3, regenerating natural systems. So composting is the first one, and I fully understand that probably most of your offices don't have a system to just set up a compost. But this also includes setting up a food waste or a greens waste organic stream that can then go to a facility that will turn it into composting. And that's a really good way to regenerate natural systems and turn that waste into something positive. Sustainable landscaping. So if you do operate in an office space with outdoor areas, there is going to be some kind of landscaping team to manage those. So looking into those and seeing if they're operating sustainably, are they using electrical equipment, are they using smart irrigation to reduce water waste, things like that. And then green spaces. So creating green spaces in your office is a really good way to regenerate natural systems. It improves air quality, and as a bonus, it's also very aesthetically pleasing. So now we're going to talk a little bit about understanding your office waste, and we're going to get Emily back in to run over CitySwitch's visual waste assessment tool.
Great, thanks Freya. To kick things off, I have just launched a poll. Would love to know, has your office done a waste assessment or audit in the past 12 months? And you've got some options there. Yes, you've done an assessment. Perhaps you've got someone in to do an audit. Maybe the building owner has done one at the base building level, the whole building level. Maybe you've not done one before, or it's been a little bit longer than 12 months. So let us know. Just click one of those options and click submit. And we should start to get some answers coming through. Okay. So it's about 35% on the visual waste assessment, as well as no, we haven't done one before. Got about 45 responses, so that's almost everyone now. So that's a pretty interesting split there. What I'm going to do now is take you through the visual waste assessment. So if you haven't done an assessment before, this will be a really great intro. And we've obviously got lots on the line as well who can provide their insights from their recent example. The CitySwitch tool has been around for over 5 years. Last year, we made some updates to improve the functionality of the tool. It is really quick and easy, and it's free. It's a free way for your office to understand your waste. You'll complete the worksheet, you'll send it to your CitySwitch program manager, and they'll turn it into a report for you. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes each day over the course of 1 week to observe the contents of your bin, and one person can do it alone, but it's a really fabulous way to encourage other team members to engage with waste as well. Some notes up here on the screen, so you should avoid holidays or special occasions. We're really looking for an average sample of a working week and conduct the observation towards the end of the day before the cleaners come. Wear gloves and use tongs. Shuffle the contents of the bin around to give you a better look. And what you'll be doing is noting the capacity of each bin, how full it is, and observing the composition of it in percentages. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. But first, Freya, can you flick the slide for me? Just back on, yep. So here we've got Airmaster. They've done their visual waste assessment recently and demonstrating the perfect setup. You'll see it's not too messy, it's not too smelly, hopefully. He's got gloves, he's got tongs, and the waste assessment open on the laptop. So potentially 2 or 3 people could help out, one calling figures from the bin and the other typing. Next slide, Freyja. And here is a sample sheet for you. So starting on the left, what you'll do is enter the area of the office you're in. So kitchen, for example, you'll enter the type of bin that you're looking at. So maybe it's landfill or mixed recycling. You'll enter the bin size and you'll see the handy guide that we've got there to help you do that. You'll enter how full the bin is. Maybe it's just 10%, maybe 50%. And then moving into those yellow columns, you'll run left to right and select how much of that bin is landfill, how much is mixed recycling, etc. So if we look at row 2, this is a bin in the kitchen. It's a mixed recycling bin. It's about 50% full, and 80% of what's in that mixed recycling bin is correct. Unfortunately, there's about 20% that are landfill items, maybe some soft plastics or dirty takeaway items. And you can make notes over in the right-hand side to help you identify some of those consistent troublesome items. You'll also see in the coffee cup stream, in the red column, that we'd encourage you to count up coffee cups in each type of bin, which can be a really nice way to identify all the disposables coming through and encourage a reusable campaign, for example. Next slide, please. So that's the tool sheet. You'll complete that, you'll send it through to your program manager and they'll produce a report for you. In the report, you'll get an estimate of the volume of your waste your office produces annually, plus insights into recycling, contamination, a potential recycling rate, and a list of suggested actions. I've pulled out a few graphs from that come in that report, just to give you an example. If you're looking in the middle bar chart, this demonstrates the current practice is 55% recycling. However, over on the left, you can see that contaminants bring it down to an actual 35% recycling rate. There is potential for 56% to be recycled if contaminants can be removed. So you can see that in the potential in that bar graph. And just above, you'll see that best practice is working towards a target of 70%. And we can aim for that by reviewing what's going into our landfill bin and avoiding the production of that waste in our office, or maybe finding more solutions through reuse or recycling. The bottom table is demonstrates the percentage by which each stream has low to heavy contamination. And this is really important, as we know contaminated streams can default to landfill. So for example, mixed recycling is 50% green, is 50% clean, so it's green in this table, but there's 13% contamination from organics and 35% from items that should be in the landfill bin. 2% is coming from paper, but that's considered a low level contaminant. That's the CitySwitch visual waste assessment tool. You can reach out to your program manager if you'd like more information, but it's also available on our website.
All right, I will now.
You just popped onto mute, Freyja.
Oh, sorry about that. So there are some further options you can take. Visual waste assessment is a really good start, particularly if you've never done any kind of assessment before. But if you are looking for some other options to understand your waste a little bit better, the first option is conducting a waste assessment, and you can do this by reaching out to a waste consultant or similar service. So at Green Connect, we actually do quite a lot of waste assessments, waste audits. So you can do this either as an opportunity audit, which is going through your general waste bin, your landfill bin, and seeing which items in there could have been diverted through another stream. Or you can do a contamination audit, which looks at your commingled recycling bins and sees, or other waste streams, and sees what in there is contaminating that and should have gone to a different stream or to landfill. So doing a waste audit, each waste stream item will be weighed. So it does provide very concrete data for you. as to what is actually being generated in your waste. It does unfortunately only capture one very specific point in time. So if you did want more information, you'd have to do several of them over an extended time period. But a really good thing about waste audits is that it does allow you to see waste that your tenancy is producing specifically. A lot of you will be operating out of buildings with more than one tenancy. So if you want to just see the waste that you're generating, using a waste audit is a really good option. And some buildings do have incorporated waste audits into their cleaning contracts. So I would recommend reaching out to your building and facility managers and seeing if that is an option for your building. You can also talk to your building manager or owner about getting a neighbours waste rating. So neighbours doesn't specifically audit tenancies, but you can get a whole building rating, which includes the tenancy data. It requires 12 months of waste data from your building. And it's based on a recycling rate, so the percentage of items being recycled as they leave the building. It does have that building boundary, so it doesn't really look at it afterwards, but you can use the material recovery score system that they have, which looks at their waste supply chain of the areas that you're using to recycle. And if they are operating up to high standards of sustainability, it will improve your score. It also looks at your data quality, and your score can be improved if you are getting very high quality data. And that is just an official certification. It lasts for a year from once you've gotten it. And you can choose to keep that private, or you can choose to advertise it depending on the needs of your organisation. So I want to introduce Duncan Le Good. He works in business development and sales at SoilCo, and he is going to speak to his experience for a while on organics waste. There will be time for a Q&A at the end of his section, so please, as he's talking, if you have any questions for Duncan, pop them in the Q&A section and we'll get to those when he is finished. So Duncan, if you want to jump up.
Thanks, Freyja. Thanks to yourself and Emily for the invite to talk today, and welcome everybody. We'll go to the first slide, please, Freyja. And we'll go to the next slide. So first of all, it's a quick introduction to SoilCo. So SoilCo is a composting or organics processing business based in Illawarra and Sydney. We also have a site in the Tweed. Today I'm going to be talking about the role that composting plays in food waste and green waste diversion targets in New South Wales, and some of the issues that we see as a business in regards to the diversion of those materials. I think it's really important to understand that composting businesses at the moment are the primary outlet for food and garden organics materials within New South Wales, after the food waste has either been repurposed or reused for other options, such as food banks or animal feed or what have you. Next slide, please. So I think what I'm going to try to suggest is that composting businesses are not just waste management businesses. Even though we do fall into waste management regulatory frameworks, and often we hear terminology like food waste and green waste. And we'll go to the next slide too, please, Freyja. We're actually resource recovery businesses. And the vision and missions of SoilCo represent the fact that even though we are taking in these supposed waste products, it's all about what we manufacture out of that material and where that goes for beneficial reuse. It's really important for our business to understand that it doesn't matter what we accept at the front end, we have to be able to make fit for purpose products that meet the relevant regulatory requirements to actually reapply to land. And we need to be reapplying that product to land with no environmental harm or damage caused. And I think that's one thing I'd really like to get through to people. And next slide, please. So just to finish off with SoilCo, we do operate, as mentioned, in the Wollongong or Illawarra regions and Tweed, and that is indicated by the maroon markers on that map. And you can see the expansion potential of the business. We are looking to expand into Sydney and then into Southeast Queensland as well, and to really get an East Coast footprint to promote the diversion of garden organics, FOGO and food for beneficial reuse as compost and compost blended products. All right, next slide. The opportunities for food waste diversion, particularly within businesses, as well as at the household level, is being driven through regulatory mandates. So what we're seeing at both a federal level and a state level across the country is this desire to extract more organic materials from landfill and to put them back into the circular economy as either a composter product, or in some circumstances it might be used in what we call anaerobic digestion for energy generation. And I'm going to speak specifically to New South Wales because that's my primary experience, but I will touch on some of the experiences we get in other states, Victoria and South Australia included, because what we're seeing is a discrepancy across our states in regard to what we can accept in the composting facilities. And you'll see here, first of all, to talk about New South Wales. At the moment, we're looking at a mandated FOGO collection for every household within New South Wales by 2030. This will likely be a service offered through your green littered bins. As you can see, the first photo there to the upper left, we're talking about the kitchen caddy type experience where we will see a compostable or Australian standard approved compostable caddy liner accompany that caddy itself. It will then be removed from the kitchen into the green bin. We would have a standard collection, as we can see as we move around that circle, and then through into the composting process into finished product. This will be the majority of FOGO products or food and garden organics that we see come through our systems. The separate mandate that will come to business is for 2025. It's a little unclear at the moment as to how this is to be mandated. The target is for businesses and other entities that generate large volumes of food waste. There hasn't been suggested what that means. I've heard different regulatory levers around the size of your collection or your waste collection per week through to the potential quantity of food you might generate through your business. So I think there is some clarification to come from the EPA, particularly in New South Wales, in regard to that. And you'll see as you move through these presentations, they will be made available. I've got some hyperlinks for you through to some relevant articles or through to the actual regulatory information itself on the New South Wales EPA's websites. So what we're sort of trying to promote here as an industry and as a business is clean streams of materials coming through our businesses. The pictures there of that truck particularly are not what you'd see in a FOGO collection, but that is what we would call a food-only collection. That little truck there would be used to collect from businesses, or it is used to collect from businesses in the Illawarra and Sydney. It's specifically designed for the food components because they tend to carry more moisture, and we have to be very careful in the compaction and therefore the safe transport of that food. Okay, next slide. So to talk about that regulatory context, so we have had a lot of misinformation in New South Wales over the years, and our business, unfortunately has been caught up in that. If you're to go online and have a look at some YouTube videos over there, you may see our MD, Charlie Emery, talking about what we can and can't accept at the facility, one of our facilities in Wollongong. The EPA have moved to clarify their position last year in regard to what can and can't go into food. So whereas a couple of years ago, we were actively promoting the acceptance and collection of compostable packaging, that's now changed. And I think it's really important that people understand that as a business, SoilCo and other organics processing businesses are regulated at both the front end of our businesses as well as at the back end. So the front end comes down to the licensing, acceptance criteria of material, and then we're also at the mercy of statements like this from the EPA. So the New South Wales EPA have made it very clear what can and can't go into a FOGO and a FO collection. And that's really important when you're designing your FO collections at the business level, to understand how you roll that out to your staff, what systems you put in place where you can capture that food or garden material. But one thing that's really noticeable here is that no compostable packaging in New South Wales can go through a composting facility. And also the majority of fibre-based materials also, such as cardboard or food spoiled cardboard or tissue, paper towel, etc., realistically can't go through our systems. There is an allowance there, as you can see, fibre-based kitchen caddy liners used to collect and transfer food waste to the FO bin. So if you choose not to use an Australian standard compostable caddy liner in your caddy bin, you can use newspaper, for example, but they're trying very hard to cut down on the quantity of fibre that goes through into the FO or FOGO bin. Next slide, please. So I'm going to move through this really quickly, but obviously they're the things that can't go in, and I've got a comment there as to why compostable caddy liners only, no other compostable packaging, and that comes straight off the EPA's website. Next line, please. Next slide, please. So, and then it becomes more confusing when you get to other states. So, you know, it's been very hard to find some detailed information on other states, but you can see there in South Australia, they recently rolled out green bins to Rundle Mall, and the Minister for the Environment has noted in that statement that compostable packaging can be accepted. In Victoria, very similar to New South Wales, except they do allow for additional fibre-based materials, and you can see that they will accept serviettes, paper towel, tissues, food sold, cardboard, newspaper, paper, etc. And I've put a link there to one of the councils in Victoria so you can have a look at what they do and don't recommend to go into their FO and FOGO bins. Okay, next slide. So why this is important is that when we start to look at what the compost gets used for in our environments, and I actually can link this back to what Freyja mentioned earlier in Principle 3 about regenerating natural systems. In an urban environment, about 80% of what you buy from a landscape yard, either to use as a garden mix, a soil top dressing, a potting mix, street trees, urban landscaping, sports field top dressings, majority of those products will contain recycled organic materials that have been composted through one of the main composting businesses on the East Coast, whether it's ourselves or somebody else. A lot of people don't realise that. So what goes in the front end of our processes often comes out the back end. And that's why we're regulated in regard to the fit for purpose products that can be reused into these urban environments to cut down on any contamination or chemical contaminants that may potentially have environmental impacts. All right, next slide, please. So when it comes to an individual business, we are working to, you know, quality release of compost on a batch basis. And we're using a whole range of different parameters to measure and test ourselves against. The ones in the table there are very specific to the regulatory framework. So the New South Wales EPA adopted some of the standards within the Australian standards documentation to actually write into legislation what the level of contaminants or some level of contaminants must be below. And I think that's a really important part. So this is something we have to meet as a business. And therefore, as you can imagine, goes right back to whatever comes into the products at the start of this process. Next slide, please. And this is what it kind of looks like. I mean, this is the bare face of what we do in our business. So to the far left is a FOGO collection from Wollongong Council, and in it you may see a few items of contamination. When we get through our entire composting process, the photo in the middle is finished product. That one is a blend of compost and hardwood sawdust and manures that to go out for use as a soil amendment. You can see some of the flecks of plastic that have made their way through the system. It's still compliant, but those flecks of plastic are still there. And then the photo on the right is what we call our overburden or our oversize. And this is where, you know, the majority of those sort of contaminants end up in product that is not saleable. And it is then, you know, up to the company to spend significant money on actually cleaning that product up to a point where it can then go back through a process or be on sold for some other beneficial reuse. Again, within the requirements of those standards set by the EPA. Next slide, please. So the contamination responsibilities fall to everybody in that chain. And this is what we are trying to manage and discuss. At the moment, the majority of education is done through councils. Councils in cooperation with their processing partners have a responsibility to deliver that message to constituents in regards to that source separation, but everybody plays a role here. Okay, so the waste generator doing the right thing at point of source is the best outcome. Businesses and councils educating, and I would even put in there the EPA as well, educating people on what is the right thing to do to get beneficial outcomes. The collector, like ourselves, monitoring bins as we collect them and refusing to collect them if they're highly contaminated. The processor, we as a business have separation activities and technology at the start of the process as well as at the end of the process to keep those contaminants down, and then working with the regulators from a compliance point of view. So this whole pathway, it starts with the waste generator, with the residents, with employees, and we hope to see beneficial outcomes through the whole process. Next one, please. I think we're almost finished. So my main take-home message today is don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, we're a highly regulated industry, which makes it a very complicated place to play. And don't be afraid to ask. Ask people what is the best way to collect and transfer the food from your business down to where they're actually picking it up. What can you put in that organics bin in the state that you are in? Where is the resource going? What approvals, permits, and licensing does the composter or other organic recycler hold? How do they manage your food resource? What do they make it into? What technology do they use? You know, I mean, I won't go through them all there. You can read them in your own time. But I think it's really important to ask these questions, understand what you're trying to achieve, and put systems in place that meet the expectations of the entire chain. Next one, please. We'll go past this one too, please. And that's it. Thank you very much. Next one.
Thanks so much, Duncan. I might just jump in and ask you a couple of questions that have come through.
Sure.
So Sarah has just questioning her understanding about allowances relating to PFAS concerns. So in the PLA compostable kitchen caddy liners, do they not have PFAS in them?
I'm not sure on each individual caddy liner, but there is a level of compliance that the EPA puts out as part of the waste classification guidelines. So they did an addendum recently that says what the upper limit of PFAS allowance is in any materials for beneficial reuse or disposal in New South Wales. And as an industry, last year, the EPA wrote a document called What's the Go with FOGO, and they identified that the PFAS levels are well below those allowable within the regulatory framework right now.
Okay, great. And Roger has asked, how are bones managed in food organics?
Look, yeah, thanks to the composting process and to those microbes, they do a wonderful job, and we find that all bones are broken down through the process. They tend to, you see, sort of your chicken bones end up going first because they're basically hollow to a certain extent, and then other bones will break down through the 12-week process. So you don't often see any bones coming out the other end.
Fabulous. Thank you. And I guess I just wanted to provide that context that some waste contractors are taking their organics out to a composting facility. Some might be going to a waste to energy plant. So as you said, important to ask that question. And, you know, some buildings might be lucky enough to have maybe a GoTerra system in the basement or a dehydrator like we have at Town Hall House in Sydney. So it is really important to ask those questions and really understand what can go into your organic stream, because it's slightly complicated.
Yeah, and look, and I'll just comment on that. A very little known thing with the New South Wales sort of waste environment is that it's up to the disposer under legislation in this state to determine the accurate location for that material to go, for their waste to go. And that encompasses every individual in this state, and people don't realise that. So that's why the questions are so important. You have a legal responsibility to dispose of your material to the right location. And the legislation is really quite heavy. So getting people, ask those questions, ask the people who know, and get the best outcomes for what you're trying to achieve within the business environment.
Fantastic. Thanks, Duncan. Freyja, back to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Duncan. It was very interesting to hear that perspective. We're now going to go into setting targets and developing your waste management plan. And we are just going to get a poll up to see which of you have a waste management plan, who's done one before. Yeah, so it's just popped up on the screen now. So if you have a plan with SMART targets, have you got a vague plan but no current management? If you could just jump in and answer those. We go through, we got about, yeah, I'll just wait for some more responses to come in just to get a better grip of where everyone's at. So looks like around, yeah, it looks like a fair percentage of you have a vague plan without proper current management. Around 20% have a plan with SMART targets. 18% don't have a plan but would like to implement one. and have a more ad hoc approach to that. So it seems like everyone either has a plan or is interested in developing that, which is a good response. I just want to stress how important it is to have a plan. It is really, really vital. You cannot manage your waste properly without having a plan. You can't understand or share the progress that you're making unless you have one of those. So we've identified 4 key things here to go into your waste plan. So understanding your waste, we have already gone over some methods you might use, but it is really important to have that because it allows you to focus in on the waste your office is generating. We're all coming on here from different parts of Australia, from different sized offices with different regulations. So the waste you generate in your office is not going to be universal. You need to understand what that is in order to plan accordingly. And then setting smart targets, having targets is really important. And I'll go into this a little bit more momentarily, but just provide a focus for what you actually want to achieve and how you can get there. Engaging stakeholders, again, I will go into this a little bit more in a moment, but that is really important. And as we've been over, identifying circular economy principles and actions to take is also really important. So targets, you need to make sure you're setting targets. They should be clear. They should be achievable. SMART goals is a really good framework for using those rather than putting out a target that's quite vague, like improving recycling levels. You should be setting really specific targets. So reduce the amount of waste generated in office by 10% before end of financial year 2024. Achieve 60% diversion from landfill by 2025, or achieve a 5-star neighbours waste rating by 2026. And you can see all of these are measurable targets. They have a really specific goal in mind, and they have a timeline that you can achieve that through. Engaging key stakeholders. This is really, really important. I'm sure most of you coming in here today are tenants. So you may have a lot of really good ideas about waste management and things that you'd like to implement for your tenancy in your office. But in order to do that, you will need to engage with your building and facility manager. And they can offer really good practical advice on the various solutions available for your office. They can also put you in touch with your waste contractors if you don't already have an established relationship there. And they may be available to then discuss new and improved systems, including facilities for new types of waste streams. I would personally recommend assigning a dedicated coordinator to keep track of these discussions. This is just helpful so that information isn't getting lost through a long line of people. And also thinking about those targets and SMART goals before approaching your key stakeholders and managers so that you can come into the discussion with a really clear objective and they can provide feedback on how you might achieve that and how feasible it is for your office. You should also talk to them about your waste collection services and whether they are GECA certified. So GECA is Good Environmental Choice Australia. And that certification just shows that a product supply chain meets the highest social, ethical, and environmental standards. So developing an action plan, I've just got an example up here from CitySwitch, and this is thinking about a specific waste item, which is paper, and the different actions that you might take in your office to go about I'm sorry.
All good. The slide's up there. Freyja's just dropped out for me. I'd assume she's dropped out for everyone else as well. Hopefully she'll be back in just a minute. Otherwise I can share the slides, but we'll see how we go. While we're waiting for Freyja, there are some questions that have popped up in the Q&A. Jane, I've just responded to you with respect to compostable coffee caps. If that organic waste is heading to a facility like SoilCo to be turned into compost, then we can't put compostable packaging material in there. But if you have another system in place, like I think you might have GoTerra, they may be allowed. So best to check with the building manager. And Lee, so you've asked if we have any data on the percentage of organic waste coming from cafes compared to staff kitchenettes. I don't have data to hand, but from experience, food businesses or hospitality businesses in Australia waste about 30% of their food, unfortunately. So unless they're managing it really carefully, generally speaking, hospitality businesses as producers of food do have more food waste coming out compared to staff kitchenettes. So within a building, they're a good place to tackle food waste. Did anybody else have any other questions? Otherwise, what I can do is ask Roger to step in. Oh, there we go. Magic. Freyja, are you back?
Hello, yes, I'm so sorry. I don't know what is going on. Just a little bit of technical difficulties. When did it drop out?
You were at your action plan with the green slide with the table in it.
Oh, yes, okay. Let me pull this back up. I'm so sorry for that. I don't know what was going on there.
No worries. We've filled some time with some Q&A, but
Great.
keep going.
All right. And is this is all coming up for you again?
Yep, that's
all right. Do I need to go back over the action plan, or can I move on to the next?
I think you can move on to the next slide.
Okay, awesome. So sorry about that interruption. All right, so I'll move into some of the practical strategies for improving waste management in your office. So that'll be some ways to improve that, and also some of the most common waste items that we see in offices again and again, and how you might manage those. So surveying and engaging your colleagues, it's really important to understand where everyone in your office is at. Everyone plays a role in generating waste. So they need to have input into any further solutions, and you need to be able to understand where everyone is at so you can provide the correct education to people. So some of the ways that you can get insight into this is creating surveys and feedback templates, and CitySwitch does have a survey template on their website if you would like one already made for you. But this is just a good way to see where everybody is at.
So it seems we've lost Freyja again, unfortunately. Maybe she's having some internet issues at her end. Roger, I wondered if you wouldn't mind stepping in now to do your presentation.
Emily, I'm more than happy to step in and do my presentation. You know me, any opportunity I can to speak about environmental sustainability in this forum would be great. So are you able to share the presentation at your end?
I am. I'm just flick that into full screen and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Hi, everybody. My name's Roger Stamford. I'm General Manager of Shared Services at EML. EML, we like to consider ourselves one of the largest organisations in Australia that nobody's ever heard of. But what we do is we provide case management services for workers' compensation. So we have direct relationships with state government entities in New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia, and we help people get their lives back through managing them through the workers' compensation process. So that's what we do. We've got 11 tenancies around the country and a total of a little over around about 4,000 staff. So what I want to do is talk to you today about some of our current waste streams. This is going to be very familiar to a lot of you, what you see in your current work environments, and some of the things that we're doing, and they speak a lot to what we've already heard about today, what our waste audits look like and how they go. And there we've now created our problem, and what we're doing now to try and overcome those issues that we identify as part of those waste audits. I'm then going to actually issue a bit of a call to arms for anyone based particularly in Adelaide who might want to jump on board with a little pilot that we're working with Adelaide City Council on in recycling. So as I said, workers' compensation, over 3,000 staff, there we go, 12 tenancies around Australia. And we've got offices in all states and territories except Northern Territory and Tas. We do have a target of achieving climate active carbon neutrality certification by the end of FY 2025. And we don't have an environmental sustainability team. This is very much something that a group of individuals with day jobs would like to kind of do to help out, but we don't have a dedicated resource within our organisation looking purely at ESG. Next slide. So what we've got in front of you is a series of slides illustrating the waste streams that we have in most of our tenancies. On the extreme left, we have a very standard bin station that is very similar across most of our tenancies. We've also got in most of our tenancies simply cups, which is that second photograph along. And then there's a couple of kind of weird random recycling methods that we have available in particular tenancies. That third one, that blue looking bin, is actually paper towel recycling. And then we still have in Burke Street in Melbourne a soft plastic recycling. Red Cycle, of course, went belly up last year, but the building management down there in Melbourne have provided an alternative for soft plastics recycling, only in one tenancy, unfortunately. Next slide. And these are the signs that we see above many of our bins. I think it's important to call out at this point that we have 12 tenancies around the country. There is no single recycling system that is common across those tenancies. So that is to say, every single tenancy is slightly different to every other. So these signs I've got up in front of you here, they're examples of what we got in a tenancy, but we couldn't reuse all of those signs in all of our tenancies because there's these weird nuances between tenancies based on state government regulations, based on the building management and what they're minded to provide, based on the waste contractors, what they can deal with, and based on the cleaners as to what they want to touch. So there's a lot of stakeholders for us as tenants to wrangle, and that is one of the major issues that we deal with in our multi-tenanted enterprise. Next slide. So some of the things we do, we've already spoken about earlier on in this presentation. We've got no single-use plastics available in any of our tenancies. We don't provide, although we have coffee machines in all of our tenancies, we only provide ceramic mugs for people to use. We don't provide paper coffee cups, and we don't provide reusable coffee mugs. Reusable takeaway ones with lids, that is, people can just help themselves to the ceramic mugs that we then reuse and then go into the general pool. Next slide. We do also provide, particularly for our large events, edible cups. So they are genuinely edible, those ones you see on the left-hand side. They taste a little bit like All Bran, kind of funky to drink your wine or beer out of, but they work beautifully for coffee. Edible is very much in inverted commas, meaning they can be eaten, but gosh, once you've eaten one of those cups, it definitely sits with you for the rest of the day. And then on the right-hand side, particularly again for large functions, we do the return and earn. In Sydney, that's through Recollect. And even though we've got designated bins that we use for collecting all of our deposit paid cans and bottles, that's a picture of me the morning after going through those bins, just making sure we've got out any contamination, because our service provider in that space is very particular about not having any contamination. It's all about the glamour in the world of waste management. The next slide. And we do our waste audit. So this is speaking to what Freyja was talking about earlier on. We get our base building cleaners in most instances to come in on particular nights once every 6 months, and they undertake a waste audit on our behalf. In the centre of the screen there, you can see an example of what's going on. They then provide us with the kinds of breakdowns that you can see on either side of that screen. On the left-hand side, that's our mixed recycling and the breakdown of the contents. On the right-hand side, that's a typical landfill bin and the breakdown of those contents and what should and shouldn't have been in there. Next slide. So as a result of those routine waste audits that we do, we're able to generate our recycling rate for all of our largest tenancies around the country. So we've got some of them listed there. The dark green bar is the hypothetical maximum we could achieve. In other words, how much could we redirect away from landfill? And the lighter green bar adjacent to it is what we actually achieved according to the waste audit. Needless to say, there's quite a gap in some tenancies between our theoretical maximum and what we've actually been able to achieve. Adelaide doing pretty well, but George Street and Parramatta really not so well at all. So that left us with our issue. How could we as an organisation, based on all of those things that we're already doing, nudge the needle towards achieving our maximum recycling rate? And we took the view that it was about education. We have the signage, we name and shame groups, we publish our results across the organisation's intranet, but we still just weren't shifting the needle on getting towards those maximum results. So we've decided to work with our learning and development team to put together a virtual gamified recycling training program that will become part of our compliance training across the entire organisation. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. So the next slide. So I'm only going to give you some screen grabs here rather than showing you the live tool, but effectively the mode we've given is the game plays very similar to a 1980s video game, old school Atari video game. So think about Plinky Plinky Frogger style music in the background. That's what we've got going on this game. So we've called it Recycle Right. And as you can see on the right hand side, the first step is for staff to choose their tenancy. Again, we've had to make 10 different modules of this because there are no two tenancies that have the same recycling regime. So our poor L&D guys have created basically 10 different versions of the same game. The next slide. So it's important to understand from our perspective, where did we get our source information from? How did we decide what could be recycled, which bin it should be going in, and all of those various parameters? We consulted with our base building cleaners, we consulted with the base building managers, and we consulted with the waste contractors in every single tenancy around the country, showing them the matrix of the different types of rubbish we generate, the different kinds of bins we have, and getting them to approve and endorse what we then subsequently turned into this training program. So we've tried to keep the training program fun. As you can see, we've given it, you can get to level up across the training program. It starts off at a fairly humbling recycling rebel. And once you've achieved leveled up from there, you get to recycling rookie and recycling rock star. And once you got to that stage, you've considered your compliance training done. So everybody starts at that recycling rebel level. Next slide. So this is what it looks like on the screen, and it's different for every tenancy. Depending on what tenancy you're in, we'll have a different range of bins available. And so this is an example of our George Street tenancy, where we have landfill, paper and cardboard, the green organics, mixed recycling, the Simply Cups tube, our recall or Iron Mountain secure destruction bin, and then our e-waste. Technically, we don't have an e-waste bin, but we do have a process behind e-waste, so we wanted to capture that here. We then present to the player the different kinds of rubbish, and we ask them to drag and drop the rubbish into the particular bin. So next slide, if they get it wrong, they will get a message like this. Feeling blue that you got it wrong? Well, maybe that's a hint for the correct bin. So we try and tell them that it's wrong, but the feeling blue obviously is the hint. If they get it wrong a second time for that same piece of rubbish, next slide, then they get kind of this, dude, you're rubbish at rubbish. And we make them go back to the start. And there's a few variations on this. Some say you're a terrible human being. How do you look at yourself in the mirror every morning? That kind of stuff. And we try and keep it light and amusing so people might actually want to get it wrong just to see what that error message might be. However, if they get it right, next slide, then this is what they will get. Assuming, in the case of your child's drawing, assuming there's nothing that could not be considered confidential and you won't make your child cry, all A4 paper should go into the blue paper and cardboard bin. So that just gives you an example. There's lots and lots of different, so there's 5 or 6 different types of rubbish per level, gradually increasing in degree of difficulty. Next slide. So once they reach the end of a particular level. So, for example, the end of the Recycling Rebel, they get the little fanfare, the 80s blinky music goes off in the background, and we give them a little feel-good hit saying, you're good at this, let's go out and smell compost together. And then it moves on to the next level. And so, as you can see, it goes from Recycling Rebel, Recycling Rookie, up to Recycling Rockstar. Next slide. All right, so that is our virtual training program. A very quick overview. It's not something that I can unfortunately distribute to all of you because it is on our in-house L&D training platform, so it just won't work on the internet, unfortunately. But very happy to give you some insights in either this session or post this session. This is my call to action for anyone out there based in our Adelaide tenancy. We are working with the Adelaide City Council at the moment to try and improve the commingle or the mixed recycling in commercial waste streams in Adelaide. We have a large tenancy, around about 400 staff in Adelaide. And right now, there is no commercial mixed recycling going on in Adelaide anywhere. All of the mixed recycling in those yellow bins is going to an energy recovery factory, a recovery facility, which is a cement factory in the outer suburbs of Adelaide. That's okay. But we would love to see our hard plastics in particular being properly recycled. So we're working with the Adelaide City Council, who in turn are working with the MRF or the recovery facility, and they have agreed to set up a pilot to take our mixed recyclables to the recovering facility. But we need more people to participate. The only requirement is that Cleanaway be your waste contractor in Adelaide, and we can then get enough of a group on board to participate in this pilot, and then we can see if it's a proof of concept to maybe roll it out across the entire Adelaide commercial district. So if you are interested in participating, and Cleanaway is your waste contractor down there, please let me know. Cheers, Emily. That's it. I'm done. You're on mute there, Emily.
There we go. That was great. You can't hear me echoing. Just me hearing myself. Okay. Roger, I've got some questions for you. Would you mind answering a couple of questions from Sarah? She has asked, did you make your own waste signage, or was it via your contractors?
Yeah, so we've been quite determined to use our contractors' waste signage. We do switch it up every now and then by adding things and removing things, just so it stops being wallpaper. But yeah, in general, we use whatever the waste contractors provide, because we know that's a single source of truth in that particular tenancy. Yeah.
Okay, and she's also asked, how did you come up with your recycling rate targets?
So as part of the waste audit, the auditors will go through all of our different bins, and they will weigh the contents, and from that they will know what percentage of our overall waste that we're producing is genuinely unable to be recycled, so genuinely landfill. And what we're finding is that genuine landfill cannot be recycled waste accounts for between 20 and 30% of our overall rubbish. So therefore, by extension, we could, in theory, recycle 70% of our stuff. So that's where we're getting that theoretical number from, is from the waste audit, and that what can't be recycled versus what potentially could be recycled figures.
Okay, fantastic. I think you've also answered Sam's question, which was how do you calculate your theoretical maximum recycling rate as well?
Yeah.
So great. Thanks for the question, Sam. If anyone would like to get in contact with Roger, is it okay if I share your email address after this session? Is that the best way?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to try Freyja again now. She is back with us, and unfortunately it was Teams dropping her out before.
Take 3.
Not the Wi-Fi. So we'll flick into Freyja's presentation to finish us off today. And Freyja, I can see you've got a black screen for me. Is that the same?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But we can hear you. So that's pretty useful.
You can hear me.
I can hear you.
I don't know what.
There you are.
Teams has a problem with me today. All right.
We can see you, and I'll just share the screen.
Thank you.
No worries, go for it.
All right, back into the practical strategies. So identifying ways to improve and focus your waste management and some common waste items. So onto the next slide, Emily. So surveying and engaging your colleagues is really important. We all play roles in generating waste. It's important to understand where everyone is coming at waste from, what their background and knowledge is, so that you can account for that when you are planning educational programs. So some of the ways that you can do this are creating surveys and feedback templates and distributing those to your colleagues. CitySwitch does have one of these on their website already made up for you, so you can use that one, or you can design your own if you want something more specialized. Organizing educational groups. This is really good for having more of an open conversation with staff and colleagues, and just sort of getting feedback as you're running this. If you can, comparing waste generation across teams and sites. This is more relevant for larger offices, if you have multiple office buildings or multiple teams working in your office. And this just isolates the issues that might be impacting specific teams. So maybe one team has a bit of a higher level of education than another, and having an understanding of that just allows you to tailor the way that you are educating your colleagues and your staff members. Likewise, analysing the contamination rates of each bin station. So if you do have multiple bin stations in your office, seeing if some have higher or lower contamination rates. This can also be used as like friendly competition to try and get people to improve their recycling. Next slide, please, Emily. So I'll speak to signage. Signage is really important. Having correct signage is a really good way of helping people understand what can and can't go into bins, because as you may have noticed, it is quite complicated and the regulations change quite often. It is also very different depending on what state or area that you're living in. So ensuring that your signage reflects the area that you're from is really important. You can have wall signs at eye height, preferably large enough to read from a distance of 2 to 3 meters. Having signs on the bins themselves as well. Hello?
Frey, you've frozen for me. I think I can hear you though, so I believe you can keep talking if you'd like.
Sorry, my Teams keeps shutting down. I'm not sure it's doing this. So back in. Back to signage. So following the design principles when you're planning your signs. So using visuals more than words. People don't like to read. So using images as much as possible to convey what can and can't go into each bin. Making sure that they're simple. You don't want to overwhelm anybody with information. If it gets too confusing, people won't be bothered to read it. Making them editable. Like I mentioned, we are all operating under different regulations. So having signs that can be changed to reflect the current regulatory standards of where you're living is very important. And then also making sure that they're quite clear and they demarcate what can and can't go into each stream. I would recommend just picking out a few really common contaminants to put on your signs rather than trying to list everything, just to keep it, like I said, simple and clear. Can move on to the next slide, Emily. So coffee cups, and we did have a poll to chuck up just to see how your office supports diversion of coffee cups from landfill. This is one of our most common waste items that we see when we're auditing offices. So if you want to just jump in and click which option applies to you, and we'll see how everyone is doing with reusable coffee cup initiatives or coffee cup recycling initiatives. Just wait for some more responses to come in. Seeing where everybody's at with this. It will just depend on where you're located as well. I know everyone has access to different resources depending where they are. At the moment, it looks like quite a large percentage of people have a provision of reusable coffee cups, which is really great to see. And around 23% are supplying good coffee in the office kitchen. Around 2% have incentive programs. 10% have a recycling stream like Simply Cups. And around 11% of you have signage to encourage reusable cups. So it looks like everybody is taking some kind of action to promote coffee cup recycling and reusable coffee cups, which is really good to see. Like I said, this is one of the biggest waste items that we see in offices. And as you can see up here, 90% of coffee cups end up in landfill. So it is a pretty substantial item. So some of the best outcomes for recycling or improving coffee cup waste is to provide reusable cups. Having them there, just make sure that they are always available for staff to use. You can also encourage staff to bring their own. My recommendation would be to provide them yourself, because even people with the best intentions don't always remember to bring them. So just having them there is really great. We have also seen initiatives where cleaners are paid to bring reusable coffee cups down to local cafes or food service providers on site or around offices, just to ensure that they are there when people go down to get their coffee. And then negotiating discounts or reward programs with local cafes to incentivize staff. So receiving money off for using reusable coffee cups, or having some kind of stamp rewards program that acknowledges people who continue to do the right thing and provides them with some rewarding for that. BYOF, this is a really cool incentive that came out of the War on Waste. It's Bring Your Own Friday, and it was a way to introduce reusable cups after COVID and encourage that happening. So picking out a day of the week, in this case Friday, and encouraging all staff to bring their own reusable coffee cups that day. And then, of course, supplying quality coffee in your office. It's not always going to disincentivize people from getting a takeaway, but it is a really good way to ensure that you have an option there for people to just make their own coffee rather than going out and buying it. And then as a secondary choice, of course, we do want to have some coffee cup recycling program, and organisations like Simply Cups or Mates on the Move can help you with that. Next slide, please, Emily. All right, container deposit scheme, CDS. So CDS refers to the 10-cent refundable single-use drink containers. There are CDS schemes operating in most states and territories in Australia at the moment. So South Australia, Northern Territory, New South Wales, Queensland, ACT, and Western Australia all have current CDS programs. Victoria is planning to introduce one in November of this year, November 2023. And Tasmania also plans to introduce a CDS program, but it hasn't got a set time period as of yet. So if you aren't sure whether an item is part of CDS, you can look for the symbol. So it's this 10-cent refunded collection symbol, and that will appear on cans and single-use drink containers. Your office should have a separate CDS stream. How you will recycle these items does depend on your office's needs, but having a separate stream is a really good way to reduce contamination, and it disincentivizes people from just putting it into the wrong stream and having things get mixed up. If you are a larger office, you might have a system of CDS pickup service. So things like City Return and Earn or Mates on the Move will come to your office and pick up your CDS items like a regular waste contractor. If you're operating out of a smaller office and you don't have that higher level of CDS generation, having staff members allocated to bring CDS items to bulk return centres is a really good option as well. And you can do some research into whether that is available near you. Next slide, please, Emily. So paper. Paper is been a really large source of office waste. There have been a lot of improvements in this, and so we would assume that these methods on screen are already in place in your office. That is keeping documents digital, introducing pool printing, printing double-sided, avoiding colour, adopting sustainable procurement, and recycling your paper waste. So we do assume that these would be in place, but it is always good to just double check if they're there. And paper recycling is really important. Paper can actually be recycled up to 8 times before it needs to be degraded into organic waste and break down. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Next slide, please, Emily. E-waste. So e-waste is a really, really important part of office waste. So it contains quite a lot of really valuable components and resources. These are quite intensive to mine. They are often quite rare, finite. We don't have an unlimited amount of them. And e-waste also contains quite a lot of toxic substances. So it is really important to dispose of it correctly because of these reasons. Some recommended approaches that we have are minimization. So really thinking about whether your office needs the electronic equipment that you're purchasing and how important it is. Sustainable procurement, so looking into where your electronics are coming from. Is it a sustainable organisation? Is there a better way to obtain this? Repair and maintenance, as we mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, ensuring that when something breaks, the first step is not just throwing it away, it is figuring out ways to repair this, figuring out ways to maintain it. Purchasing secondhand, so if that is an option near you, instead of always purchasing something new, finding an alternative secondhand option. And then donating usable electronics if you really need to upgrade or there is some kind of regulation in your office about upgrading and you still have usable electronics, passing them on to somebody else who can use them. And then, of course, implementing an e-waste recycling stream in your office. And you can see at the moment only around 50% of e-waste is recycled in Australia. So there's definitely a lot of possibility for improvement there. Yeah. We'll now move on to Q&A. So if there's any questions, if you've dropped them in the Q&A portion.
Yeah, there's a question here about the hierarchy for the best waste stream for office copy paper. So if you have the secure paper disposal option, the commingled recycling, or a separate paper or cardboard stream, what's the best option for disposing of our office copy paper?
I would definitely recommend having a separate paper and cardboard waste stream. The reason that having more streams is better is it just reduces contamination. So even though they technically can go into commingled recycling, having a separate stream is one of the best methods to reduce contamination of paper waste and ensure that it is getting recycled.
Great, fantastic. Were there any other questions? Please drop them in the Q&A or in the chat. Otherwise, we might keep going in the interest of time just to wrap up this final section. Okay, I don't think there's any more questions at the moment. Yeah, there's one from Sarah actually. She'd like to know where the 50% stat for e-waste recycling comes from.
Yeah, so that is actually from our most recent National Waste Report. So in the 2022 National Waste Report, they estimated that only 50% of e-waste in Australia was recycled.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Freyja. I think we can keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll jump into the supplier showcase. So there is a much larger list of recycling suppliers on the CitySwitch website to check out, but we'll just run through a couple here that you might be able to access. So Planet Arc are a not-for-profit organisation, and they help people, businesses and governments reduce their environmental impact through education and behaviour change programs. I think their most helpful resource is Recycling Near You, which is essentially a search engine, and it can help you find your nearest place to recycle specialty items. If you have something unusual that can't go into a typical waste stream and you want to know where to take it, using that resource is a really good way to find the nearest supplier. Next slide. OzHarvest. So OzHarvest focus on food rescue and redistribution. They also do educational programs and sustainability work, and they're really just about reducing food waste and ensuring that as little of that goes into landfill as possible. Next slide, please. Recycle Smart. So this is a newer organisation. They're currently operating in the Sydney area and also down in Melbourne. And they're a pickup service for difficult to recycle items. I think the highlight here is that they can recycle soft plastics, which is something that we've really struggled with finding since the collapse of RedCycle. But they also take things like e-waste and clothing and textiles. Next slide. So Mates on the Move, they're a social enterprise and they employ people who have left the prison system and help divert waste from landfill. And they provide recycling pickup services for some of those more difficult to recycle items like paper towels, coffee cups, polystyrene and CDS items. Next one. And then last we have Good 360, and this is an organisation that will connect your business with charities, schools and vulnerable people willing to donate unsold and surplus goods, services or disaster recovery essentials. So if you have some things in your office that you are looking to get rid of, but you don't want to send it to landfill and they're still in usable condition, partnering with suppliers like Good 360 is a really good way to get rid of those. Oh.
And we've got a couple of spare minutes here, so if there are any more questions, please drop them in the chat or the Q&A. Otherwise, we'll look to wrap up. Okay, I'll just have a quick look at the Q&A. Okay, so nothing in there, right? Well, we're going to wrap up here then. But first, I want to give you an idea of what's next and some other resources that you can tune into to support you with your improving your waste management. So the visual waste assessment tool is available on our brand new website on cityswitch.net.au. You'll also find there 3 e-learning modules on waste management that were produced by the City of Sydney and Edge Impact. So check those out. The City of Melbourne are hosting a building tour at a Mirvac building with CitySwitch member Landers and Rogers. That's on the 13th of September. And coming up in Sydney, we have a in-person session on the 19th, and that will be alongside presentations from Mates on the Move and program member Shape. We've got a refreshed office waste management guide that's due to be complete in the next couple of weeks, as well as some new waste signage, which will be editable and give you that ability to really check in and make sure each of the items are accurate according to your own building. The recycling guide is currently on the website, and look out for some upcoming case studies and our chosen waste heroes as well coming up. Don't forget that if you'd like to get ahead, one of the best ways is to learn from others. So you can reach out to your program manager if you'd like to touch base with other members of the program and learn what they're doing with respect to improving waste management. I'd like to thank Freyja for leading the session. Apologies, teams kicked you out a few times, but we got there in the end, so that was great. Thanks to Duncan for your insights into how organics are processed, and to Roger for sharing your fabulous recycle right. Finally, today, we'd of course love you to tell us some feedback, help us improve for these sessions for next time. There's a 3-minute survey that's accessible through the QR code on the screen, and I'll be sending around the chat in a follow-up email alongside the recording. But thanks again for coming along, and have a wonderful afternoon.